welcome. We're going to be exploring a situation today that I think so many people can relate to. It's that feeling of doubt really early on in a relationship where you're left wondering, are these feelings even valid? We're going to approach this as a bit of a psychological case study, and we'll use a real-world example to really understand the dynamics at play. So let's start with the situation just as it was described.
Hello, everyone. I need some advice about my relationship. I'm having doubts, but I'm not sure if they're justified. My boyfriend and I have been together for a little over a month. Since the beginning of our relationship, I've noticed some incompatibility in terms of commitment and prioritizing each other. I'm much more demonstrative while he's more passive. I mean the following. Our meetings at the beginning happened in the late part of the day. We're talking about 10-11 p.m., and going to bed/getting home was around 4-5 a.m. The excuse was always and continues to be a busy daily routine, work, training, distance. We live on both sides of the city. Since this was having a bad effect on my body, I set a limit. I told him that I expected him to pick me up at 9 p.m. at the latest, and if not, our meeting was postponed to a day when he was freer. The result of this is that we now see each other twice a week, and on weekends, we usually spend the whole weekend together. Another huge problem for me is that I have great difficulty communicating with him. If any problem arises, he is able to say 2 sentences, and that's it. Even when I try to elaborate, he just changes the subject.
Wow. Okay, that really honest description gives us a whole lot to work with. Now, our goal here isn't to judge at all, but to sort of hold up a mirror to the situation. By just reflecting on these patterns, we can start to find some clarity and really understand what these early experiences might actually mean.
So something that's really important to keep in mind is that this relationship is just over a month old. Typically, this is what we call the honeymoon phase, right? It's when both people are usually putting their best foot forward. So when you see significant issues popping up this early, it's definitely worth paying very close attention. Let's break down the signals that were described. First, you've got this pattern of scheduling that was so consistently one-sided that the other person had to set these really firm boundaries just to get a normal night's sleep. Second, there's this almost total shutdown when conflict comes up. And third, just a general lack of those small, thoughtful efforts that really build a connection. When you look at them all together, especially in the first few weeks, these aren't just minor bumps in the road, they're data points. And that leads to a really crucial point. These probably aren't just isolated incidents. What they're likely doing is revealing the fundamental dynamic of this relationship. The patterns you see right now in communication and how you prioritize each other, in emotional effort, these are often the very same patterns that will continue and maybe even get stronger over time.
All right, let's dig into what I think is the core of the issue here, because it can be kind of confusing. The partner we're talking about does show signs of interest, right? Talking about the future, offering support. So if it's not a lack of interest, then what is it? Well, all the evidence seems to point to a lack of something much more fundamental, emotional presence.
And this just perfectly illustrates the difference. On the left side, you see these actions that show interest in a future together. But on the right, you see the in-the-moment behaviors that build a real, present connection. Things like literally turning your back on your partner in a group, or not pulling them into conversations, or just showing very little sensitivity when they're upset. Those actions, they signal a really deep disconnect, no matter what future plans are being talked about.
And this is the key concept right here. Emotional presence isn't about big, grand gestures. It's really the small, consistent act of being attuned into your partner. It's that feeling that someone is truly with you in the moment, not just physically next to you. And from a psychological standpoint, that is the bedrock of feeling secure and valued in any relationship.
Okay, now, of all the issues that were raised, one of them stands out as probably the most significant red flag. And it's not the late meetings or even the lack of thoughtful gestures. It's the complete breakdown of communication when things get tough.
This one sentence, wow. From a clinical perspective, this is incredibly revealing. This isn't just about someone who's, not a big talker. This describes what we call a communication wall. Because conflict is going to happen in any relationship, it's inevitable, and the ability to navigate it together is everything. A 2-sentence limit makes that pretty much impossible.
Yeah, this kind of behavior points to some deeper issues. It really signifies a deep discomfort with emotional vulnerability, an inability to process conflict, and often emotional immaturity. A healthy relationship absolutely requires both partners to be able to stay in a difficult conversation long enough to find some kind of resolution. When one person consistently checks out, the other is left totally alone to carry the entire emotional weight of the relationship. And that leads us directly to the next dynamic we often see, which is overcompensation.
When one partner is under-functioning in a certain area, like expressing emotions or putting in effort, it's a very common human reaction for the other partner to instinctively start over-functioning to try and fill that gap. You can see how this dangerous cycle works, right? One person feels like there's not enough affection, so they start giving more affection. They see a lack of planning, so they start doing all the planning. And while that might feel like you're fixing the problem, what it's actually doing is reinforcing the unhealthy dynamic. It basically teaches the under-functioning partner that they don't have to step up because someone else will always be there to make up the difference. That is an exhausting and totally unsustainable role to play. So after looking at all these patterns, where does that leave somebody in this situation? Well, it's not about just declaring the relationship doomed. It's more about shifting the focus away from just hoping for change to actively creating an environment where change can actually happen, or where the lack of change becomes impossible to ignore. So here are 3 concrete, really actionable steps. First, state your needs calmly and specifically, without placing blame. Second, and this one is so crucial, watch what they do, not what they say. Promises are easy. Actual behavioral change is the only real sign of progress. And third, you have to consciously pull back on the overcompensation. Stop filling every silence. Create a void and just observe if your partner is willing and able to step into it.
This might just be the most important takeaway from this entire analysis. It is so easy to fall in love with someone's potential, with the person they could be if they just tried. But a healthy, clear decision has to be based on the reality of who they are and how they're behaving right here, right now. And so we're going to end with this one final question. This isn't for us to answer, but for anyone in this kind of situation to ask themselves. Take away all the hopes, all the excuses, all the what-ifs, and the potential. Just look at the dynamic exactly as it is today. If you knew with 100% certainty that this is how it would be forever, would you choose it? Your honest answer to that question, it holds all the clarity you need.